On farms over the hardest-hit parts of the Ogallala Aquifer, a $189,000 center pivot irrigation system can become stranded before the loan is even paid off. The machine may still circle the field, but the water it needs can sink 3 feet deeper every year. Here is the problem. The financial damage starts before the well runs dry. Falling groundwater turns equipment, land value, crop insurance, and farm debt into one trap. A center pivot is a steel arm that circles a field and sprays crops. Its value sits underground. Well yield follows the difference in the squares of saturated thickness, so pumping capacity can fall faster than the water level. With 80 feet of saturated aquifer, a well can produce 800 gallons per minute. At 40 feet, yield can crash to about 200 gallons per minute. Peak summer corn needs 550 to 772 gallons per minute from a standard quarter-section pivot, so at 200 gallons per minute, the hardware still works while the crop fails. That is where debt takes over. A center pivot structure alone costs $140,000 to $170,000 before the well. The full package adds a $30,000 deep water well, a $30,000 pumping plant and gearhead, and a $34,000 electric power unit, totaling $189,000 for a standard 130 irrigated acre operation. That equals about $1,453 per irrigated acre. Finance 80% over 7 years at 7.5% interest, and annual debt service is roughly $28,520. If the aquifer fails in year 3, the farmer can still owe nearly $95,000 on an asset with zero productive capacity, secured by the broader farm. Land value falls with the water. Nebraska center pivot irrigated land averages $8,515 per acre, while dry land averages $4,395, a $4,120 premium. Central Nebraska puts the gap at $5,120. Kansas irrigated cropland averages $5,271 versus $3,230 for dry land. In the Texas Panhandle, good water irrigated land commands $2,500 per acre against just $525 for dry land. Losing water on a standard 130 irrigated acre Nebraska farm wipes out $535,600 in equity, and central Nebraska reaches $665,600. Lenders face the same cliff. Agricultural lenders average about 62% loan-to-value on farmland. A parcel appraised at $6,000 per acre can secure a $3,600 per acre loan, a safe-looking 60% LTV. If water fails and the land reverts to $3,000 dry land value, the LTV jumps to 120%. The loan goes underwater, without the borrower missing a single payment. Yet only 8% of agricultural finance institutions have taken concrete steps to price this risk. The Ogallala makes this more than local. It stretches roughly 174,000 square miles beneath 8 states, from South Dakota through Nebraska and Kansas into the Texas Panhandle, and at its peak held enough water to fill Lake Huron. Nearly 200,000 wells pull about 18 million acre-feet each year, irrigating 14 million acres and supporting 27% of the nation's irrigated land. Crop and livestock production above it generates an estimated $35 billion in annual agricultural market value. That is 30% of everything American farms produce. Across the central and southern high plains, the aquifer behaves less like a renewable bank account and more like a fossil fuel deposit. Irrigation accounts for up to 96% of groundwater use, and pumping has removed an estimated 330 cubic kilometers since pre-development. Parts of the Texas Panhandle have dropped more than 200 feet. Kansas pulled 2.47 million acre-feet in 1 year, while recharge returned just 0.75 million. Eastern New Mexico lost more than 20% of remaining groundwater from 2018 to 2023, with functional depletion projected over most of that region by 2028. The machine behind this boom began as a fix for uneven land. Frank Zybach, born in 1894, built the first working prototype in 1948 near Strasburg, Colorado, because rolling terrain resisted ditch irrigation. He filed a patent in 1949, received approval in 1952, and sold the first commercial unit that year. Robert Daugherty of Valley Manufacturing acquired exclusive rights in 1954, and engineers raised the lateral pipe to 8-foot clearance for tall corn. After the patent expired in 1969, Finney County, Kansas went from 11 active pivots in 1965 to 700 by 1975, while Nebraska rose from 3,000 in 1972 to more than 17,000 by 1978. Efficiency does not erase the capital risk. Soil moisture probes can add $1,500 to $5,500 annually per field. Variable rate nozzles can require up to 250 electronic units on one pivot. Subsurface drip irrigation can cost more than $4,000 per acre. In 2023, farmers spent $3 billion on irrigation equipment and $3.3 billion on operational energy. Saving water can mean buying more infrastructure before the old infrastructure is paid off. Credit data shows the stress moving into banks. Every 14-foot decline in the aquifer's water table lines up with a 26% jump in agricultural production loan delinquency rates. A 10-foot decrease in saturated thickness is associated with a statistically significant 0.139% increase in delinquency on short-term production loans. Equipment and production nodes are hit harder than long-term farmland mortgages. The pivot fails financially before the land sale happens. Federal crop insurance can push the wrong way. A 1% increase in insured crop acreage is linked to a 0.22% increase in irrigation withdrawals. A 1% coverage expansion is linked to a 0.28% rise in groundwater withdrawals. In the western United States, a 1% premium subsidy increase is linked to a 0.45% rise, or roughly 475,901 acre-feet per year in total freshwater withdrawals. When a crop is doomed, saving water means stopping the pump. But insurance contracts can require continued irrigation for indemnity, and stopping can void the payout. Ogallala counties collected $22 billion in insurance indemnities from 1989 to 2017. When wells fail, the local equipment market can fail too. A center pivot is a quarter mile of galvanized steel, and moving one means disassembly, flatbed transport across state lines, and reassembly. Those costs eat residual value. A dry well in western Kansas also means nearby farms may face the same shortage, so local used pivot demand can drop to zero. Broader machinery markets are under pressure. New four-wheel drive tractor sales fell 41% in 2025. Self-propelled combines fell 35%, and Titan Machinery reported a $36.2 million net loss in one quarter, driven by excess inventory and rising floor plan interest. Collapse is not guaranteed. Sheridan County, Kansas restricted pumping by 20% through the LEMA program. Farmers cut water-intensive corn acreage by 23.3%, increased drought-tolerant sorghum acreage by 335.4%, and held net profits steady, because lower pumping costs offset lost crop revenue. Western Kansas managed a similar shift between 1990 and 2005, when irrigated acres fell 16.6%, with limited negative economic and tax impacts. Timing mattered. The decline was gradual, and operators adopted efficient technology before the shock arrived all at once. That window is narrowing. Major dairy processors have committed $1.6 billion to cheese plants over some of the thinnest, fastest depleting edges of the Ogallala, and one facility needs the output of more than 100,000 dairy cows. University of Texas Bureau of Economic Geology projections indicate that up to 70% of Texas Panhandle aquifer sections could become practically unusable within roughly 20 years. That timeline sits inside the payback window of billion-dollar investments. The Ogallala crisis is no longer only environmental. Every $170,000 pivot over falling water is a bet that the reservoir will outlast the loan. And in more parts of the southern High Plains, that bet is starting to fail.